For the class of 1941, long commutes and financial pressures amidst the Great Depression made attending Regis uniquely challenging, even before considering the school's exacting and unforgiving academic standards. But there were other powerful cultural inhibitions that were just as burdensome back then, nuances that are largely lost today. The accounts of one boy who entered Regis around that era serves as a precious reminder of how things have changed and what has stayed the same.
Regis was a prep school, that is, it prepared you for college. But I had never met anyone from the neighborhood who'd gone to college. Not one. College was for rich kids, not for people from Brooklyn. Fear was caused in part by the relentless pressure of the conformity in the parish. Most of the other boys were going to Bishop Lowen, St. Michael's, Xavier, or LaSalle. If I went to Regis, I'd be separating myself from all of them. They would walk to school while I took 3 subway trains to get from my part of Brooklyn to 85th Street and Park Avenue in Manhattan. Park Avenue, just the name of the street, was a symbol of some other rarefied existence in the region of the very rich. If the school really was an elite school, then I'd be declaring myself part of that elite. I didn't want to join any elite. I used to think that it was the school's fault, that somehow I was a clumsy social fit among a group of upper-class kids. That wasn't it at all. There was actually a leveling democracy of merit at Regis. Some of the kids were poor, most were middle class, a few were rich. But no boy could buy his way into the school. You had to pass the test. There were constricting rules, dress code, an obsession with punctuality, an assignment of privilege to the boys in the upper grades. But the school wasn't riddled with problems of money and class. The school was rigorous, severe, the teachers dedicated to excellence. My own problems at Regis were more complicated than the cliched case of a poor kid thrown in with better off boys. For the first time, I was in a classroom where everyone else was as smart as I was, and many were smarter. That was new to me. I couldn't just sit there and pay attention and come out with decent grades. I had to work.
As a merit-based, all-scholarship prep school in the earlier years of the last century, Regis was a place where boys from contrasting backgrounds could build lifelong bonds. David Manning was fortunate to have had a relatively comfortable upbringing as a child.
He was born in Canada, Oshawa, Ontario. My grandfather was an executive with General Motors, and he was instrumental in opening automobile factories back then.
By the time David entered Regis, his father's work had already taken the family not just across the country, but around the world.
Family of 7 took the train, and then they had to go by ship to Australia. So he went to places when he was probably 5 years old. Tahiti, Fiji.
Nevertheless, David's parents made sure to keep him grounded, which would serve him well at Regis. His quiet, amiable personality was well liked by his peers who grew up under very different circumstances.
My grandparents were devout Catholics, and so they sent their children to Catholic schools. So when they were in Australia, Dad was educated by the Presentation Sisters when he was a little boy. And then when he got a little bit older, by the Christian Brothers in Australia. When he was back in the United States, he was educated at Sacred Heart in Bayside. At one point, he and my mother were in the same class. They knew one another, but didn't meet till many years later. And then, of course, he ended up at Regis.
Andrew Cassidy grew up in a household more typical of the class of 1941. To be blunt, they were poor. His parents were both recent immigrants from Ireland, and his father found work as a building watchman. Two of Andrew's three sisters also had to work to help support the family. They lived close to Regis on 81st Street and 3rd Avenue at a time when the area east of Lexington Avenue was lined with crowded tenements. Like David, Andrew was known to be a quiet kid, but one who would occasionally pop up with wisecracks during class. At Regis, both boys would quickly become friends. Later, they would each choose paths that meaningfully diverged from their younger selves and each other, but they would still remain lifelong friends.